Good morning. My name is Russell Clark. I am the Senior Director of IT for Rutgers Business School. Please allow me to introduce Jeff Brown, who is the Dean of the University of Illinois, Dease College of Business. Jeff will be facilitating our discussion on digital disruptions in educating business students. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Before we get started, I really just want to take a moment to thank Dean Lay and Sharon and everybody else at the Rutgers team for putting together a really fantastic conference. I'm excited to be here. As you just heard, I'm Jeff Brown. I'm Dean of the Dease College of Business. That's a new name as of about 12 months ago in return for a very large gift, and we're very grateful for it. We have a great panel today on digital disruptions. I'm going to introduce everybody now, and then we're going to give each panelist no more than 5 minutes to make some opening remarks. Then I'll ask a question or two to get things started, and then hopefully we'll be able to use most of the time for interactive conversation with those of you in the audience. So we've got a great group with us today. First, we have Peter Hurst, who's the Associate Dean at MIT Sloan. He is a self-described geek, technophile, and digital warrior. He says he even has the scars to prove it. He said he was addicted to surfing the net with text-based browsers before the World Wide Web. I think you're going to see some pretty interesting things involving robots in the classroom at MIT. Next, we're going to hear from John Kraft, who's the Dean at the Warrington College of Business at the University of Florida. He has been there as the Dean since 1990, so he's in his 28th, I guess starting his 29th year as Dean, which, just starting my 4th year, I find very impressive. He also has the distinction of having a twin brother who was the founding Dean of the Business School here at Rutgers, so I sort of like a homecoming, and people are probably doing double takes as he walks across campus. Joining him is Megan Leroy, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning Center at Warrington. She has a PhD in English, and as you can see from the official bio, I love this, she enjoys designing online programs, college football, and playing with puppies. Who doesn't enjoy playing with puppies? And finally, we're going to hear from Alva Taylor, who is the Faculty Director of the Center for Digital Strategies at the Tuck School at Dartmouth. He is a researcher that focuses on innovation, technological change, organizational learning in information-rich environments. And his interesting fact is that he and our prior speaker, Dean Thomas, used to play pickup basketball at Cornell. And Alva's a former member of the Cornell football team, so a true athlete. And he also brings an industry perspective, having worked in consulting at KPMG. So a terrific panel, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter to kick us off, and we'll go from there.
Great, thanks very much. Okay. So thanks. That was a really great introduction from Joe as well, and I think you made a lot of the points that collectively we were thinking of making appear on the panel. I've got a couple of things I'd like to do, just a couple of minutes sharing some thoughts from my perspective in MIT, where I run executive education, about disruption in business education. And I'll finish by showing you a short video of some of the tech experiments that we've been doing at Sloan. On the disruption question, as I was thinking about this, I think that it's very easy to think about disruption in a very dramatic and sort of sense of it's going to vaporize our businesses. And in fact, I think our experience so far would be more that we should be thinking about what the blurring of boundaries and remixing that we're getting as a result of kind of the disruptive technology in education and how it's affecting us in business schools. We could get into that a little bit more if you like, perhaps in discussion. But I was struck by the comment that Joe made. It's a question we ask ourselves a lot at MIT, which is what problem are we trying to solve? And I think of that in terms of what problems are we trying to solve in business schools, in my part of executive education, but in business schools more broadly. We also try to think about that in terms of what problems is technology solving for us in the ways that we're using it in education, the way it's affecting us. And even though, thanks for introducing me as a geek, I do that myself as well, but we try to have a human lens on technology. So we're not, even though we're at MIT, we're not just about technology for technology's sake. A couple of questions maybe, if I could sort of throw them into the mix, or observations that I think have already been touched on by Joe, that frame how we think about these questions. One is really from the demand side. Who are the learners now, and who are they going to be, and what are the impacts of technology on that? And again, I would say the theme that we're seeing coming out of that is blurring across different categories of learners, and the blurring also across the program. So again, interesting to hear Joe's comments about degree versus non-degree there. I think we're also having to ask questions about the supply side. Who's teaching business and management now? And I guess we're not only seeing from off campus, but also across campus. I was interested in those comments from Joe as well. And so now I'd actually like to very briefly show, if we can sort of cue up that video, a couple of examples, and these are just a couple of examples, but they're more interesting ones to look at, of how we've been using tech in the classroom a little bit. And you'll see these, they're pretty self-explanatory. We've been exploring virtual reality, everything from avatars to using virtual reality and immersive environments. We've also been experimenting with telepresence robots, so ways of bringing people into the physical classroom remotely for a variety of reasons. One quick observation before we show this: we've really, interestingly, to me, didn't start by saying what technology can we use for education or in the classroom. We actually started using these technologies to help us in our work, and then we realized that they might be interesting and useful for education. So we started from the application rather than from the theory, if you like. So with that, if we could just play the video, and hopefully that will be at least interesting to watch for about 1 minute and 20 seconds, I think. Some nice relaxing music. Not scary tech. So these are immersive virtual classrooms where people are represented by avatars, and then we move into the physical world, where we've also been mixing the physical and virtual.
It's my first time looking for the Zoom. Yeah. Those kind of things. I recognise the thing. What you're saying, yeah, it's
We also have joining us for today, Paul McDonough-Smith, remotely. Why don't you turn and wave at everybody? Do you know how to do that? Or?
yes.
So you can see we're bringing both participants into the classroom. Typically, people who are mobility challenged rather than just willing to travel. We've also been bringing faculty into the classroom using this technology, and we're only slightly worried that some of our faculty are starting to move to beach communities and turn up just by robots. And that's the end. Thank you.
Megan's here to make me help with the technology. Thank you. So again, I'd like to thank people at Rutgers for being invited to this conference. I came 2 years ago. Great experience, and I hope you all have an excellent time here. What I'm going to talk about is things that are related to what we call disruptions in the business school. And we have a slide. Is the slide coming up? That's not it. That's me. Is there a slide? Okay, well, the slide's coming up. Essentially, this is a chronology that shows the various things we've introduced. I hope you can all read this. It's designed that way to make sure if you can't read it, you need to see your eye doctor. But what this does is a catalog of things that we've introduced that we described as disruptions. Some are digital, some aren't. And it's over the last probably 50 years. And it originally started in 1974 when we introduced TV replay. And the way we did it back then, since there wasn't any technology, the idea was to get scale in our introductory courses because we were required to have full access to all of our introductory courses.
This came because we were a land-grant university, and they weren't worried about what the impact was on our resources, but how we could deliver this. So we developed what was called the TV replay system, where we had a class. It was essentially taped like it was a TV studio. We actually had a studio that was in a large classroom. And then that was essentially replayed throughout the day at various times in other classrooms for students to go watch. And then we also had an arrangement with the local public television group, and essentially these classes replayed on local public television. And what's interesting, they actually got some of the higher ratings on public television. Then later on, I'm not going to do all these, some key dates were essentially 1994 when we introduced our first specialized masters. 1999 when we went to the online MBA that was in a hybrid or blended format. People came twice a semester. In 2001, we introduced the electronic platform, which was fully digital. The courses were available essentially in a digital format. They could be viewed anywhere, anytime, any space. And even though we had this filmed in a classroom, hardly any students ever came to the class to actually sit there. They could, but they don't. Then we developed in 2004 a series of combined degrees where you could double count graduate credits in your undergraduate degree. And that allowed roughly about 40% of our specialized masters that we graduate every year. There's about 600 a year. 40% of those are combined undergraduate, graduate, and at the end of that time they double count 12 graduate credits into their undergraduate program, and then they graduate with 2 degrees that allows them to finish roughly 4 years easily. 2012 we developed the DBA, which was a hybrid format. That's our professional doctorate in business administration. And the interesting thing is we actually passed this in 2002 as a faculty, but the university sat on it for 10 years because they weren't sure whether this was actually a good idea. And they finally woke up one day, I guess the president discovered it on his desk and he said, signed it. In 2012, we introduced our Teaching and Learning Center. In 2012, we also started to use simulations as a way to measure our assurance of learning goals, and for our accreditation purposes, we partnered with CAPSIM. They've been a really good partner in helping us use simulations across the curriculum, as well as develop new products that we can use to better manage the classroom setting. We've also developed an active learning studio, and then in 2017 we launched our fully online MBA in a modular format where students never come to campus. And then in 2019, next fall, we're going to have the fully online specialized masters. So we've introduced a lot of technology, and I will say that it's not because I think we're innovative. We've done a pretty good job of seeing what other people have done in small slices, and then essentially stealing that and introducing that into the curriculum. Also, we were able to essentially roll out these products over time because they're usually, we have what I call an approach that says, if you have an idea, we're willing to try it. And so it's a passive approach, and that's led to a lot of faculty and staff coming up with ideas that have been introduced in the classroom. And our whole objective is with any of these things, there's 3 principles behind these. We want to find ways to both increase revenue and reduce costs. We want to make sure that we improve the learning environment for both faculty, staff, and students in our programs. And then we also want to introduce some of these with the idea of trying to enhance research. And if you think of this, all of these things are embedded in, there's this little triangle that we call kind of shifting the pyramid. They're either classroom related, they're facilities related, or they're organizational. And the idea is to continually advance and move through these. Now Megan's going to talk about some of the technologies, and by the way, nothing's mandated. Essentially, people want to adopt these things for them. Megan, why don't you talk a little about that?
So our primarily form of technology we've really been using lately are the simulations in the classroom because they allow practical application instead of multiple choice assessments. We've seen a lot of students benefit from those technologies, learn them. We're now looking into a site license for the college, so a student pays a fee and they can use simulations throughout their degree at the College of Business, which also encourages faculty who may have been on the edge to kind of try a simulation or a piece of a simulation, because the students aren't paying more for them to do that, right? So we have this breadth of faculty innovation and interest going on right now. We also have classrooms that are equipped with streaming, self-record, video, all of the above. We have our own IT group, our own video team, and of course our own instructional design group, which is my team, which I think really is part of the crux of getting our faculty to try new things, because they have one-on-one support from an expert in technology, in the pedagogy, right? So we're not the content expert, but we can teach you how to take your content and put it online or try new things. We also, I think, I don't know if it's on this list, we have an active learning studio where we can have synchronous virtual communication. Students can, beam in basically into their own little cubicle and team. And you can have teams that are on campus combining with teams that are virtual in a synchronous environment. So we have a lot of opportunities to really utilize technology. Again, we also do not use technology for technology's sake. That's our mantra at the Teaching and Learning Center. But I'll say it quickly too, it's an interesting idea, the idea of disruption. And I think two things at the College of Business that are important at UF, with Dean Kraft at the helm, he's the first to pioneer technology, right? So that everybody is in line right behind him. So we have a great leader sort of trying to push people to think differently, to solve a problem, to try and reach students in a different way. The other thing I'll mention really quickly with the idea of disruption, that I'm relatively new to the College of Business. I just started there in 2014, and I'm sure you heard my PhD's in English, so it was a vast move from humanities to business. And my somewhat softish bio is intentional because I also teach a writing and speaking class to 300 students. It's fully online. And with college licenses that allow students to use technology online for free, it really helps invigorate the classroom. But the thing that I think we haven't missed in the middle of lining up our long history of disruption is connection. And I think that there's a risk there that we start to use technology, we start to innovate just for innovation's sake, and we lose occasionally the connection with the student. And what the Warrington College of Business has done really well from the quote-unquote outsider's view, 4 years is nothing compared to 30 years, is really foster the college identity and the connection with the student while they are innovating, while they're using technology. So when we use video, when we use technology, a lot of times we take our faculty and put them in front of a college mascot, a college icon, a landmark, something so that online students, just as much as on-campus students, feel like they have a college experience, right? So I think that history is solid. I think we're continuing to move on. But that's the one thing I think that is really impressive, that as we innovate and as we disrupt and push forward, we haven't lost that connection with the student.
So thanks to Rutgers, and thank you for the introduction. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach, because I actually interact with industry, with non-business school industries who are facing the same issue. And so I'm going to talk first about what the lessons from them, and then how it applies to general business, particularly Tuck, where I'm from. So the first thing you should all know, it's a good thing this is the month of Halloween, because whenever I've talked to hundreds of companies over the last couple of years, and everybody in those companies is scared. They are scared. And what's interesting, not just the ones that are doing poorly, even the ones that are successful are scared, because they're not sure what they're doing now is going to be applicable for what they're going to be doing 2 years from now. And they don't know what that's going to be. So they don't even know how to guess. So everybody's scared here when you start talking about the impact of digital. And a couple of things that highlights that. 65%, when you talk to executives, they believe that 65% of our next generation, of people who are going to be going into business, are going to take jobs that don't even exist right now. That's how the fundamental change of how we think about what it takes to do business, the roles of business are going to be changing. That's sort of sober. The other thing that they talk about is that about when we ask them sort of what's going to be the enabler for success, and 80% of them say that what's going to enable success is that when we can do work differently. Now, interestingly, it doesn't say we can do work digitally or with technology, but we can do work differently. And why is that? And what's driving it isn't necessarily technology, it's what technology is enabling. Because now we're living in a fact world, that the expectations of customers, they expect information to be free, they expect to have 24/7 access, they expect whatever service or product they get is to be customizable, and they expect it to be real time. And so these expectations are changing what we think about and how we provide services and products. And that's what's driving it. The technology piece is the enabler there. And so what does that mean for education? It means that it changes what we teach, it changes how we teach, it changes the value that we hope that our students get out of what we provide, and importantly, it changes what companies are looking to get out of our students and hiring our students. It changes all of that fundamentally. And what's key to that is the companies that make the biggest mistakes are the companies that say, we're going to do what we're doing now, and we're going to digitize it. That's the horrible mistake, because it doesn't take into account this change of how we do business. It doesn't take into account the change of expectation. It doesn't take into account the opportunities. What great companies do is say, here's the value that we want to create for our customers. How can we use digital to help us? And now I'll turn briefly to Tuck. And Joe gave I was finding our tagline there on there, and sort of made me chuckle a little bit. At the core of the mission that Tuck thinks about is that we try to be personal, connected, and transformative. Personal, we try to have an intimate, because we're small. Connected, we connect you both to your classmates, alumni, and to a network of companies. And we hope transformative, that there's some experiences during that time that's actually going to change your life, change your direction. And so when we think about technology, we want to make sure, how do we enhance that, and how do we make sure we don't destroy that? An example of that, so we have a Master's in Healthcare degree program. I teach in that. And we have both synchronous, asynchronous, and residential. So asynchronous, typical that you would think about in a MOOC, where you have people who look at videos online. We have synchronous, where I actually teach to a virtual classroom. And then we'll have a residential program that we try to bring them on to bond, to make sure you have that intimate gathering. But the way the digital impacts this, it's not that we just use it to do the same type of classroom, but the actual interactions of the students is different. Away from class, they have social communities and social groups that they interact with. When I teach synchronous on a virtual standpoint, it's not just a standard teaching. We have comments going on the right, and by the way, it can be somewhat unnerving as you're giving a lecture and they're writing comments about you. But they're commenting to each other about the material. They're adding, well, I read this article, here's a link to it, here's a picture. Oh, that's exactly what I thought about. During it, I can have polls or questions sent out, and they'll have to vote. But all of this, it's not what can we do with digital, and let's try it. It's what's the experience that we want to provide, the value that we want to create, and how can we use digital to make that stronger, better in that way. Thanks.
Fascinating stuff. So I'm gonna give you about a 10-minute warning here to get your questions ready. Sharon reminded me last night that she wanted me to be a panelist as well as the facilitator. So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about what we're doing in Illinois, and then I'll throw out a few questions. So when I was here 2 years ago at this conference, I spoke a little bit about our IMBA, which was brand new at the time. And what was different about it, we certainly weren't the first school to introduce an online degree, but we were the first to do it on sort of a MOOC-based platform and have what we call a stackable credentials, so that, and let me tell you what we mean by this. You can literally come in on the Coursera website and take a bunch of our asynchronous content and access it for free. If you take, 3 of them, you can get your typical Coursera certificate by paying a certain amount of money. If you want, you can take these classes for credit, which adds in the synchronous live engagement part with the faculty. And then if you bundle it together, multiple 4-credit courses, you can get what Coursera is now calling a Master Track certificate, which is a entry point into executive education and so forth. All of this, though, feeds up to a degree, which is if you take 18 courses from the University of Illinois on Coursera and you do the live sessions and so forth, you can actually earn the full degree. There's 3 things that I think really distinguish this from other online programs. One is the stackability idea. You can sort of, as they say, try it before you buy it. You can check out the online content, the asynchronous piece, and so forth. And that's a big important piece of it. But the second thing is really, and it's what Alva was saying, we've created this incredibly engaging live session experience. And that's really the piece. When you go from the MOOC to the actual 4-credit experience, it's making use of the technology that frankly didn't exist 10 years ago to have an incredibly engaging community building interaction with the faculty member and so forth. Now, this took enormous investment up front, to build out studios and so forth. And the example that I've used before, and it I think dovetails nicely with what you were saying, is that think back to when the motion picture was first created, 100 years ago. They may have started by just walking in and sticking a camera in the back of a stage theater, but they quickly realized that it was a different art form. And you could tell the same kind of story, you could deliver the same kind of message, but you had to do it differently. And I really think of online education as being sort of, versus classroom residential education, as being like the difference between Hollywood and Broadway or Hollywood and a stage theater. It's not that one's better. They do different things well, and if you really design the experience in the online space, taking advantage of what it is really good at, you can do some pretty phenomenal things, and we've managed to be very successful at building these networks and sense of community and so forth. The third thing, in addition to stackability and the high level of engagement, is something we put a lot of emphasis on as a land-grant institution, is the whole idea of access. And we often refer to this as democratizing education. So I know we sent some, shivers down the spine of a lot of other deans across the country when we came out with this program and priced it at only $22,000 for the whole degree. But that's not the only thing we're doing to increase access. It's also the case that while you're always welcome to come to campus, and we have activities for people that want to come to campus and so forth, it's never required. So this enables some people to take the program that otherwise would not be able to do so. We have a student from Afghanistan. It's not the easiest thing for them to travel to the United States. And also, like PMBA programs and the like, the online really allows people to work around their family and work life. We offer, when we have these live sessions, we offer them at multiple times, so both to cater to different time zones, but also to cater to different work schedules. And so it's an incredibly flexible degree, and I think, I got asked last night at dinner whether we think it has cannibalized our program, and my answer is absolutely not. Our traditional MBA and PMBA were pretty small to begin with. We've grown the IMBA from 0 students to currently 1,600 in just 2 years. And plus we've had another 150 already graduate. We'll admit another 600 in January. So this program is very rapidly growing and pretty soon may be as large as all of our other programs put together. So that's an example of what we're doing at Illinois. We've been happy enough with the model. In fact, we've been thrilled with the model. It's sort of exceeded our expectations on every dimension that we measure. And so this past year, we also announced an online, we call our IMSA, our Master of Science in Accountancy, to really recreate that model for a specialized master's program in accounting, which is one of our historic strengths in our college. So that's just an example of some of what we're doing. I'm happy to take questions on that as we get into it. So let me just get things moving with a couple of general questions for the panelists. So, you mentioned that people are scared. The world's moving really fast. It seems to move faster every year, not just because we're all getting a little bit older, but because the technology really is moving quickly. And so it requires a certain amount of agility and the ability to be nimble, which is not something that universities are known for. Right? So my question as a starting off point is, what do you do in your own colleges and working within the university environment to create a culture of innovation, a culture of agility and nimbleness that allows you to do some of these things? So John, I'm going to start with you because you put up this thing, a long history of it, and I wonder what you do there.
Well, I think a couple of things, as I mentioned earlier, is we have what is called a passive approach. We don't really try and direct anything. We try and encourage people to come up with ideas. So when we actually started the MS programs in '94, actually the Information Systems Supply Chain Department came and said they wanted to start an MS. And I'd actually done an accreditation in Europe before that, and they noticed MS degrees there, and I said, sure. And then that led to other departments starting those without any real barriers. And then we developed a couple college-wide, the MS Management and MIB. And then in terms of technology, we've always had a pretty good handle on using technology in the classroom. I think the difference was as we started to invest more in staff than faculty, because the staff are really the people who are up to date on new technology. A faculty person uses something that they used in graduate school or in some other experience. They tend to not stay on the front end of it, not all faculty, but staff-driven things and staff-driven programs, and where we could enhance and encourage people to adopt these things are the key factors.
Get the right button at MIT. Innovation shouldn't be the challenge, but one way of thinking about this is I don't think we have a challenge with innovation around interest in technology and finding ways of solving problems. Oftentimes the challenge with innovation is more about how do you think about and manage risk. And you mentioned how big an investment you guys made up front. That's a pretty significant undertaking for a lot of people to think about. One of the ways that we've addressed that at MIT is we try to do a lot of partnering as a way to share learning and share risk, whether that's with other schools, with what, for want of a better word, we call vendors in the space. So we're trying to use other people's money and other people's expertise and not assume that we know it all ourselves, or even though we have a big endowment, we shouldn't really put that out on the risk. And on the I think doing a lot of experiments and setting up the culture and the mindset that encourages people that it's okay to do experiments. And as a chemistry teacher once told me, there's no such thing as an experiment that fails. You just might not have been doing the experiment that you thought you were doing, and having a healthy attitude around that.
Yeah, so to sort of agree with that. So a couple things. One is that we make sure everything that we do, we start off, it's called an experiment or a pilot. I think that's really important because it really manages people's expectations. The second thing is our students' generation, they've grown up in this world. So they're used to experimenting and trying things. They're used to 1.0, 2.0. The constraint is us, not them when it comes to trying new things. And so recognizing that. And the last thing is that we try to do things. You talk about partnering. We try to do small things first. So for example, I'm teaching a class in January. We're prototyping with an entrepreneur. We've all done class participation, right, since the dawn of time, student feedback. We're going to have machine learning transcribe class participation, where we're going to have speakers in the class, microphones in the class, that's going to record what each speaker said. We'll automatically know which student is speaking. And then we can use machine learning to calculate things like what's the, how good a response was it? Did I respond positively or negatively to it? And at some point, what we'd love to be able to do is to have students vote, give feedback, all of those things, right? But we're going to start with, and I'm going to start with, using it as a class case. It's going to be a living case as we try this thing throughout the class. So it's not like we're going to try this thing, is it good or bad, but it's they're experimenting with us and they're used to us. And the constraint is getting the approval through administration, getting all of the opt-in, opt-out clauses. That's the constraint. But the experimentation, the students, they're open to it.
Thank you. So when Dean Thomas spoke earlier, he was talking about this idea of the sanctity of the degree and the fact that whether it's a good thing or not for these smaller credentials to be coming in. So we've got this happening, right? We've got all these micro degrees, micro credentials coming on. We have new competitors coming in, whether it's companies like Google that are now teaching people how to do coding and they're putting it on the Coursera website and you can get certified in that way. Somebody mentioned that we have other units on our own campuses now that are teaching lots of business courses, right? So the universe of competitors is certainly a lot bigger than just what's represented in this room today. And I wonder if anybody wants to speculate on what that means for each of our colleges in terms of how we continue to have a clear identity and a clear role. How do we protect this idea of a business degree as something that we are uniquely good at pursuing?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest competitor we should be worried about is not providers of structured learning and qualifications and other things. It's YouTube. If you think at home now, if you want to figure out how to do something, usually I end up finding a YouTube video that shows me how to do it rather than calling a professional and certainly going on a course to learn how to fix my car or something like that. So I think that the biggest competitive threat that we're often not talking about is the option that our traditional customers have, or even our future customers, of just ignoring our existence.
So I'll apologize, given that YouTube was created at the University of Illinois. What I sometimes wonder about, though, and I wonder if anybody just has a reaction to this, is when Coursera and YouTube, or 2U and edX and so forth first started coming out, one of the questions I started asking, more to be provocative than anything, is what happens when the day comes that we all put our content out there, right? And then a person can go to Tuck to learn, digital innovation, and they can come study accounting at Illinois, and they can go to Florida for strategy, and go to MIT for, to learn about AI, and they just sort of cobble together their own degree, and maybe it gets credentialed or maybe it doesn't, but, if employers start to recognize that as a substitute for a formal MBA degree, and essentially unbundle or disintermediate the universities out of it, anybody think that's a real risk?
Okay, well, I do, but I think the way we tend to look at it is the market will somewhat decide that, and there will be somebody who will come along, probably a for-profit, and essentially say, we're going to be, now, how they grant this degree other than just printing the paper is the question. Say, okay, we're going to certify this in some way, and this is going to be a degree. And the question is, what is a degree of? Okay, maybe it's the multi-mixed degree in business or something like that. But if the market actually absorbs this and essentially validates it, I think then that's one of the things we got to be concerned about. We have to be looking forward at what competition is and try and figure out how we can participate against that competition and have a competitive advantage. So I'm actually thinking that's a good thing, not a bad thing, because it's this idea of cannibalization. People once said way back when we started this, well, if we do this, it's going to cannibalize our existing programs. And my view was, well, if we're smart enough to do it and it's going to cannibalize our existing program, wouldn't somebody else do it? And so you always have to be thinking about what can we do to preserve our brand, but also maintaining the quality and how you can do that, using technology and other means to get the message across to the consumers.
I think that's a great point. I'd add to that, think about what is the degree. I think there are some lines of work where there's a certification requirement, and there's going to continue to have to be something like that. It's hard to imagine certain professions without that. But if the degree is more just a signal of having some bundle of capabilities as a worker, then I think that's much more challenging. And there are technologies. We just had a workshop at MIT a couple of weeks ago on building a robust blockchain system for gathering all of your different experiences, and not only formal learning ones, but also projects that you've worked on and delivered and that kind of thing. And that you could imagine having a digital resume that is certified by somebody for its authenticity of all the different parts. Yeah. Do we need, as academic institutions, to try to sit atop of that stack of things and say, well, we can be the certifier of certifiers? I'm not sure. Might be interesting to try to solve that problem.
So I've got other things I can ask, but I promised, and I always like it best when the audience has a chance to jump in. So we do have a couple of microphones here, and we have a hand here. Can we either get a mic or get you to a mic? Sharon, would you mind? Yeah. And please introduce yourself when you ask a question.
I will help you review the history of Illinois. Okay? Illinois, okay, is nowhere. However, it's one of the most innovative universities. To our best knowledge, Illinois is the first university PhD in our country. Secondly, Illinois may be the first school head Department of Finance. Was set up in 1964, used qualitative approach, then hire me to upgrade quantitative approach. Oh, by the way, everybody worry about the technology. I think we go too far away to a program talking nonsense without basic. So I believe to be a good manager, should command 3 skills: analytical skill, writing skill, and presentation skill. That indeed I innovate in Illinois. My first book published in Illinois at that time, 85. Third edition just published. Last year I put a copy outside. But essentially, no matter what, we gotta learn, teach the student basic. We cannot cheat in them. I can teach you get rich within 5 minutes. That's essential what we're doing around MBA program for the last 20 years. Well, no matter what, talking about machine learning, not that tough. My grandson studied junior at Georgia Tech. His term paper is 50 pages. Grandpa learned a lot from him. So I think we should go back to the basic. No matter how you play the trick, teaching students analytical skill, writing skill, presentation skill. Don't cheat in them, please. Okay, that's my comment.
I just want to say I did not pay for that advertisement for Illinois. Thank you. So go back to the basics: analytics, writing, and presentation. Anybody want to comment on that?
There's just one comment to sort of support that. We're involved with a group called the Internet of Things Talent Consortium. That's I think you might be involved in that as well. But industry and academia getting together to try to solve the talent needs that we need for IoT. What all the companies keep coming and saying there is that learning about the technology, AI, machine learning, all those kinds of things is not the problem. It's actually the management skills and the fact that organizations still have humans in them. Hopefully that will continue. And that actually a lot of the things that we've traditionally taught in business school are the things that people need. And so the challenge is, how do we add all of this extra knowledge while still being able to sort of keep our eye on those basic capabilities.
I'll tell a funny story. About a week ago, I was in New York and I'm on a board at TIAA, and we went to do a visit of the IBM Watson facility to learn about all the capabilities they have. And the first presentation slide that they put up had a typo in it. And I thought, well, Watson doesn't do spell check, right? And it actually goes to show that they were there, they were so focused on all the cutting edge technology that they could do that they kind of forgot some of these basic principles. So thank you for that comment. Other questions or comments from the panel? Yes?
Mike Malafakis from Wharton. Since the core competency of higher education is research and dissemination of that research through teaching, everything that you are doing requires partnering with specialists who are not necessarily core to the university. And the question is, build your own, buy, or lease, but the economics of this going forward, and I'm most familiar with Illinois, and Dean Brown, you partner with Coursera as one of the first, or maybe the first, to do a degree, and now this is where Coursera is pushing. Did Illinois, just as an example, are you thinking of always staying with this platform since it's the dominant platform, or ever branching out, learning from your process and doing it internally? And that's sort of for all the 4 schools represented on the panel, which in that debate of building or working with outside partners, it's something we're dealing with right now.
So I'll answer for Illinois, which is Coursera has been a terrific partner, and I'd like to say that we essentially co-built this degree platform. Both of us have made a lot of investments in it together, and they just spent 2 full days on campus last week kind of strategizing for the next several years. So we do not have any plans to move away, but I can tell you that as a dean, this is a venture-backed company. They hope to go public at some point. I mean, I do think about, from a risk management standpoint, how do we position ourselves if, God forbid, Coursera didn't make it as a company. I don't think that's going to happen. They're doing quite well. And so some of the things that we built in to manage that is obviously we own all the intellectual content. So, and we can use that content in other places and for other purposes besides on the Coursera platform. But I'll tell you, when it came to the build versus buy decision, I did not want to be in the business of investing what would probably turn out to be, in the long run, hundreds of millions of dollars in building and maintaining a 24/7 available platform that's accessible anywhere in the world, that's constantly building in new features and so forth. That's just not what my comparative advantage or our comparative advantage as an institution is. It is Coursera's advantage, and they're really good at it. And they also bring a lot of other things to the table, 35 million registered users, great analytics, and all of that. So we have no intention of going with anyone other than them. But we do, in the background, continue to build our own capabilities, primarily as a risk management tool more than anything else. I don't know if others want to share experiences of yours.
When we started back in the 90s, we were approached by several companies and looked at them, but we decided to go it alone, primarily because our faculty didn't want to get locked into a system where a company was trying to amortize their cost over some time period. They wanted to be introducing new concepts. So what we've done is we built a platform in all of our programs that essentially works off the university's learning management system, and it's worked out fairly well for us. We still have people approach us, but I doubt if we're ever going to change, because that allows us to make changes whenever we want. If the faculty comes to us and say they want to do something different, we can do it. And we've been through, 3 different learning management systems, and we've been able to survive. I think this question of whether you go with another company or do it yourself has to reside with the idea of, from a profit point of view, how much are you going to be giving away? And then from the other point of view, are they providing access to customers? That tends to be the key thing. I think the technology part of it is of little importance, since in the end, we're all kind of the same.
Yeah, I think there's a challenge. Access to customers is important, and we're also concerned about are those partners potentially going to end up owning our customer relationships, and that would be a very big concern. We've got a strategy trying to be platform agnostic in many ways, and in fact think that we need to have the ability to be agile, because the technologies and the potential partners landscape is probably going to evolve. And rather than getting locked into any one, we'd rather think that we have some innate capabilities around pushing out our learning through whatever platforms and channels will be coming along in the future. We also invested in our own, like MIT, and everyone I think knows about edX. So we've got, even though we're not always using edX for everything we do, we've got a credible threat against maybe some of the purely commercial providers that it does look like we could go it our own if we had to.
Sure. Hi, my name is Phil Patrick, and I'm an adjunct faculty here at Rutgers MBA program, and I studied at the U.S. Military Academy
and Rutgers undergrad, and Columbia MBA, and Wharton, and Harvard Business School. And I have t-shirts from all of them. So my question has to do with sort of that brand integrity or the degree integrity. And as we change to different learning models online, we also change to different flat-out credit requirements for our graduate degrees. My sort of question and thought is, what does it mean when someone says they have an MBA from fill in the blank? What does it mean for University of Illinois? If I really don't know if the person even stepped foot in America over the 2 or 3 years of study, what does it really mean? Here at Rutgers, we're lowering the amount of credits that it takes to get an MBA, and I like that. I think it's making it more accessible, but it changes the definition of what a Rutgers MBA means. In an era where everybody wants to put on LinkedIn that they have an MBA from Harvard or they've studied at Wharton, I'd love your thoughts on what do you think it means to say I have an MBA from such and such a school. And West Point helped develop my perspective, because if you have a degree from West Point, believe me, you've done a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is I teach in lots of executive ed programs, and one of the things we're trying to do is to elongate the tail of the value to our people, is that not only that once you've done the executive ed, but we try to build a community of them, again, using digital tools to keep in contact, to update them, etc. So one of the things we do is we go back and look at what they're doing in LinkedIn, and it's amazing how many of them have on their LinkedIn page what looks like an MBA from Tuck.
Oh, yeah.
And so when the school has certain requirements, and they kind of talk to them about that. So I think that is a clear issue. I think the way that we try to think about it is, first of all, kind of patrolling that. And by the way, when our alumni complain about additional degree program, it's always that. It's diluting the brand. Are you diluting the brand? I think for the pipeline of the companies that hire our full-time MBA students, I don't think that distinction is one that I think it's clear. They know students, who are there versus students who have an executive ed program. The sort of branding from LinkedIn and other things, while I think that's a friction, again, I often look at challenges as opportunity. I do think, at least for us, we view that as an opportunity for branding, that it shows people all the reach and the touch that we have, as long as it's clear which of the degree programs that they've been involved with us. So while we see it as a little bit of a noise, we actually think it's a branding opportunity in that way.
I'll just say for Illinois, we're in a slightly different situation. We actually don't have a big executive education program, and so we don't have the issues in that regard. But with regard to your question about the online program, our curriculum in the IMBA is pretty much exactly the same as the curriculum in the full-time or the professional, what we call basically our PMBA program. So the curriculum is the same. Many of the faculty are the same. They're taught by our leading faculty. We've not shortened anything in terms of requirements and so forth. And if anything, if you look at the credentials of the incoming class, the online is in many ways even more impressive in that they look more like an executive cohort. The 13 years of average work experience, many of them are part of the reason they didn't want to take 2 years and go back to get their degree is that they're already having very successful careers as entrepreneurs or tech executives or military or whatever the case might be. So for us, it's actually been a reputational positive. And at the end of the day, they all receive the same degree. There's just one MBA diploma that you get from the University of Illinois, depending on, regardless of which program you're in. I'll also note these programs, the distinctions are becoming less and less over time. So in our PMBA program now, several of the classes that they take are just the online course. Now that's not the majority, but actually many of the students in that program are actually clamoring for more of that. So I think the emphasis, as long as you're emphasizing quality and you're emphasizing quality at all levels. So who you have teaching in the program, the quality of the students coming in, the quality of the education you provide them. As John said on a different topic, the market will speak and the market will recognize that over time. And so I don't have any concerns given what we're doing right now with that regard. I don't know if others want to add.
No, I will say that if you think of it, everybody that's out there that's working, they have certain sets of skills. And I think the market does a pretty good job of rationing these people down and seeing who essentially has a skill base and who doesn't. So if you look at it over time, the nature of the MBA probably won't really change. I mean, the number of credits that actually are offered in the MBA right now, I think they could range from as low as 22 all the way up to 62 if you wanted it to. But the market essentially absorbs these people based on some kind of skill set and based on information. So I think it does a pretty good job of sorting this out. It doesn't mean there isn't going to be somebody who doesn't have a degree that does really well. It's just that the majority favors people who essentially went through competitive programs and essentially did very well, or did enough to graduate. Or as we say, pay the fee.
So a different version of that story, actually, but from our perspective, we've introduced an experiment called MicroMasters at MIT. It didn't start in the Sloan School, it started in the professional space still, where we have about 100,000 people taking MOOC courses, which are truly half of a one-year professional master's course worth of credit. Some number of those paid to take proctored exams, and at the end of the day, we ended up, I think, after the first experiment with 1,000 people who were really demonstrated how well qualified they were to then come and finish a semester on campus and get a master's program out of that, master's degree out of that. But the interesting thing talking about faculty colleagues about it is the view that we get on admissions for that, the sort of reverse admissions idea, is transforming that program. And it does make me wonder whether there isn't something a bit like that, what we're actually going to see. These employers will have the ability to figure out whether what you're turning up with as a certificate is actually valid or real, right? Well, so I think that we might be able to define the problem, but we might not always be the solution.
Stuff time. Okay. Good couple.
St. Francis University. I'm interested in how this market disruption will affect the customer. I believe that a 4-year degree is like a marathon. An MBA is like a half marathon. And when I talk to young people today recruiting for our MBA program, they're looking for maybe a half, maybe 5K, maybe a sprint. And given the competition, the MBA's been around since what, 1900, and about 15 years later, the CPA was created. And I see a competition today between the professional discipline-based certifications like the CPA, MBA, project management professional, senior personnel, senior professional and human resource management. There's such a plethora of credentials that people can seek much faster. How is that going to change the delivery and even the product of the MBA in the future? Is the MBA at the end of its shelf life? I don't want it to become the Sears, but is it near the end? I'm just wondering.
Well, maybe just as you started out saying about people who are scared in business and industry, I think we'd all be foolhardy not to be looking at other industries that have probably had conversations just like this and thought that there's something special about us and not changed, and as a result aren't there anymore.
Yeah, I think, this is a discussion that we have at Tuck all the time because we are driven primarily by our 2-year full residential program, and that's the bulk of what we do. We do executive ed, and we do what we call near undergrad programs, where we do programs for undergraduates who are either graduating or about to graduate programs. And so this is something that we struggle with all the time. And our philosophy at this point is that the market is going to segment, that there's still going to be a set of people who are looking for this intense program, and that's what we can provide. But I think also just like the companies who, you know, years ago was having this discussion said that we're safe, is that we've got to be able to provide alternative, because the heterogeneity of the market, again, the expectations of the market is going to segment what we go after. And I think one of the things, and this is, Joe was saying that, you know, when he put up, you know, are we worried that everybody's the same, or, you know, roughly the same? But I think what it does and what it will do, it will make you able to communicate and deliver what's the clear value that you're providing, whether that's a specific degree, whether that's a specific type of learning, whether that's a specific flexibility in how you get the information, but you've got to be clear about that to allow the market to choose. Because just like you were saying that our students want to do things in 45 minutes, I think the generation coming up is they want to have all the information and then they want to be able to choose what fits with them, not us forcing them into this program, and if you want it, you've got to do it. And I think that's going to be a bigger and bigger change as we go forward.
I just want to add, I think this point about market segmentation is exactly right. You know, we talk about different market segments even within the MBA. So our full-time program, and I think most full-time programs kind of tend to cater more toward career switchers early in their career. They've done banking for a few years and want to switch into consulting or whatever the case might be. Our online program is much more kind of the skill builders. These are mid-career folks that are actually back there not because they really care that much about the credential itself, but because they want this skill set to help them improve in their careers. I will also say, I mean, when Yogi Berra said I don't make predictions, especially about the future, I don't want to make any predictions about the MBA, but I will say the following. Even degrees like the CPA, there are fundamental conversations going on right now at all of the big four and the next four firms about whether there should be an alternative path to a CPA that emphasizes data analytics and technology and is less emphasizing the technical accounting knowledge, right? So I think all of these things are going to need to evolve and change, and it's one of the reasons that, like most of you, we have a really diversified degree portfolio. We have 8 specialized master's programs face-to-face, in addition to different ways of getting the MBA. We've got some online, some face-to-face, because we can't predict this, and the market will speak, and we just want to be at the table, whichever way the market decides to go. I think we've still got time for a couple of questions, so yes, sir.
John Uslan, Rutgers Business School. I was interested in hearing your thoughts about alliances around online programs. Dean Thomas mentioned the convergence, the similarities of the missions of the business schools. My guess is that they might converge even closer when it comes to online programs. So the schools represented on this panel, as well as Rutgers, could afford to have their standalone programs, but for many of schools that may not hold true. So should the majority of the schools not be looking into alliances? Is it inconceivable to think of Big Ten, IMBA in the future, Mid-Atlantic MBA, and so forth? Thank you.
I think
Do any of us actually do any alliances?
So not in that forum, but I'll tell you, we are having conversations now with schools that, not other Big Ten schools, but smaller regional schools that have very small MBA programs, and maybe they serve a major employer in their area or what have you. And these programs are not very cost effective to run, and so we're having some conversations about using our IMBA content as either a supplement or a part of their program in a way that helps both, and I think those kind of things could come along. Outside of the MBA space, we're having conversations with some international universities about using some of our online undergraduate content to do something similar, basically to provide business education at engineering schools that don't have a business school. So I think those kind of things are going to start to develop. I'll look at Scott over there. My guess is that most of the Big Ten deans and Dean Lay and others, we've all invested pretty heavily in our own brand identity, and I don't think any of us are jumping to have a Big Ten MBA where you can just pick and choose from across the schools. Having said that, I think as time goes on, it'll be interesting in the online world. What if somebody comes and applies to the new online PMBA at Ross and says, well, I've already taken these 3 classes at Illinois, or vice versa, can we accept each other's credit? I mean, we kind of have that now, but I think it's going to be much more common in the online space, and I think it's something we're just all going to have to kind of figure out. But I don't see us offering one big, Big Ten degree anytime soon.
Just as an aside, any of you remember the Johnny Cash song where he worked in an automobile factory and built this Cadillac, and when he went to register it, he had to say it was a 1954, 55, 56, 57, 58, and he gave all the years. So that reminded me of this. We can have the Big Ten degree where each of you provide one course. And in the end, we can call it the Big Ten MBA.
So John and I were on a panel at UT Dallas a couple weeks ago about PMBAs, and the dean down there, Hassan, said that somebody in Texas had this idea that all of the schools in Texas were going to come together and each provide 2 or 3 courses and have a system-wide MBA. And of course, Austin pulled out immediately. And none of the schools were really very happy about it. So UT Dallas basically took it on and I think just kind of turned it into their own degree. So my sense is that these kind of forced relationships don't work very well. And it's much more just likely to come about organically where it makes sense. A cowboy MBA, I like that. I'll pass that idea along to them.
So you're not interested in code sharing on degree programs then?
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, if anyone would like to. Yes?
Yeah, Joe Bell, San Diego State. Could you talk a little about the faculty perspective? Because a lot of the people in rooms, all of you, are from schools with very strong research perspectives and requirements. And who's doing these courses? Is this your top faculty, your research-oriented faculty, or are we going out
same faculty
and getting other people and really, in a sense, kind of misleading people about who's really providing the courses?
No, we use all of our own faculty. In fact, for all of our programs, I think we only use 2 outside people for all of our programs, same faculty. Faculty buy into it because as I said earlier, behind everything there is this idea, whatever we do, it has to either, enhance our resources, it either has to create a better environment for our various stakeholders, and it can better support faculty research. So by a lot of these things, you're using a lot of different technology, and once you reach scale, most people only teach one prep. They may teach it in a lot of different formats, the 1-week format, the 1-semester format, the 5-week format, and it may be online, it may be live, but it works out really well for them. I mean, we've had really good faculty buy-in from essentially adopting these things over the years, which is amazing to some extent because most academics talk about risk-taking but never actually are willing to take the risk, and so we've actually had pretty good buy-in.
Cool. I would say the same. It's all of our teaching is done by regular faculty, tenure-line faculty. It's been quite interesting. I think it was slow to start over maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It was, we had just a couple of people that were early adopters and enthusiasts, and in the last 2 years there's been a real explosion of interest from faculty seeing what's going on to try to do this themselves. It felt 2 or 3 years ago like maybe there were folk, I was looking around the room and put myself in the same age category, who might have been thinking, we only have to get to retirement and that this is somebody else's problem. But interestingly, I'm not seeing that in the faculty that are participating now. It's the all generations.
Yeah, I mean, same thing at Tufts, full-time faculty. In fact, many of our best teaching faculty, our best research faculty, actually teach in our online programs. And part of the reason is not only in sort of the prep, but it's also the research game that's changing a little bit in that getting exposed, being published in a journal and nobody reading it is in a way, is moving away. And so people want their work to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. And this is a way for them, and we call it research to practice. But this is a way for them to expose their research ideas to a wider forum than they could in the traditional forum. And so we actually find that our some of our best research faculty really enjoy and want to teach in these programs.
I'd say second, but I guess fourth, that idea, it's all of our leading faculty, leading researchers that are doing it. On occasion, we'll have somebody who might come in from the outside, but for the most part, it's our main tenure assistant faculty teaching in the program. An interesting thing that we are now experimenting with, to use the laboratory pilot kind of idea, is as our program gets bigger and bigger, we can end up with sections of these online courses that are really, really large. In online teaching, I'll dispel the myth that it's just you record it and you're done, right? There is a variable cost to each additional student you add in terms of assessment, grading, answering questions, and the like. So what we've started to do is once classes exceed a certain size, we actually assign each of these primary faculty another faculty member, usually what we at Illinois call specialized faculty, so somebody who's not on tenure track, kind of a teaching specialist and so forth, to pair up with them, just to kind of help manage the course. And to help with, since they're a faculty member, they can help with assessment and grading and all of that as well. What we're starting to think about as we really think about expanding this program, because we're not done yet, is even having the courses as they're taught, being almost a team-taught approach to having more than one lead instructor for the course. Because as we want to offer a course multiple times a year, multiple sections, we don't want it to always fall on that same tenured faculty member, because we want them to still have time to do research. So our idea is if we could get 2 or 3 faculty members to kind of co-create the course, then we've got more people that we can draw upon for the live sessions. So that's something that's evolving, but I think we'll see how it goes. It is an experiment. So with that, I'm going to end us right on time. Thank you all for your comments and questions. Most of all, thank you to the panelists for their interesting insights, and I look forward to the rest of the day.